It was a day like any other at the rally, a sea of supporters, banners raised high, and an air of anticipation as Donald Trump prepared to address the crowd. People were pressed shoulder to shoulder, their voices mingling in a hum of energy. Among the thousands gathered was a young family, a father holding his little girl's hand as they weaved through the crowd. She was barely 6, her eyes wide with curiosity, trying to take in the towering flags and the buzz of excitement around her. Everything was normal until it wasn't. In a moment that seemed to happen in slow motion, the jostling of the crowd took an unexpected toll. A security guard, moving quickly to adjust a barricade, didn't notice the little girl in his path. She was caught off guard and stumbled forward, falling to her knees. Her parents rushed to help, their voices rising above the noise, but it was too late to stop her from landing hard on the concrete floor. For a brief second, the lively rally grew still in the immediate vicinity. Those who noticed exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of what would happen next. From the stage, Donald Trump paused mid-sentence. His eyes scanned the crowd until they locked onto the commotion. The noise from the rally began to pick up again, people expecting him to continue his speech. But he didn't. Instead, something unexpected happened. Without hesitation, Trump gestured to his security team and stepped away from the podium. The crowd watched in silence, unsure of what was happening. As he descended the stairs, weaving through the throng of onlookers, the focus of the entire rally shifted. No one had anticipated what he was about to do. But before we reveal the rest of this incredible moment, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as intrigued by this story as we are, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that matter. The rally was alive with energy, the kind that builds when thousands of people gather for a shared purpose. Supporters held flags high, their cheers blending with the flashes of cameras capturing every angle of the event. It was the sort of atmosphere where excitement and anticipation hummed in every corner. Amid the crowd was a family, standing close together to keep from being separated in the sea of movement. The young daughter clung tightly to her father's hand, her small frame nearly hidden among the towering figures around her. She looked up at the stage, her wide eyes trying to focus on the figure speaking above the noise. Her parents whispered to each other, occasionally glancing down to make sure she was still safely by their side. But the space was packed, and as security worked to manage the swelling crowd, things became chaotic. A guard, hurrying to reposition a barrier, brushed past the family. The motion was quick, almost imperceptible to most, but it was enough to knock the little girl off balance. She stumbled forward, her tiny frame losing its footing in the jostling mass, and fell to the ground. The moment was fleeting, but it changed everything. Her father immediately bent down, his voice rising in concern as he tried to help her up. Those around them turned to look, some stepping aside, unsure of how to respond. The girl, startled and momentarily dazed, didn't cry but sat still, her hands clutching at the ground as if trying to understand what had just happened. From his vantage point on stage, Donald Trump stopped mid-sentence. His expression shifted, his attention drawn sharply to the scene unfolding below. For a moment, he stood still, scanning the crowd to pinpoint what had happened. The noise of the rally dulled as more people noticed his pause, their eyes following his line of sight. What happened next wasn't planned or rehearsed. It wasn't the kind of moment you'd expect at a highly choreographed event like this. And yet, it would be the one thing everyone talked about long after the rally had ended. If you've ever been in a moment where time seemed to slow down, where you knew something significant was about to happen but didn't know what, you'll understand the energy in the air at that instant. Let's pause here for a second. What do you think Trump did next? Would you have expected him to step off the stage, or would you assume he'd continue with his speech? The crowd's energy shifted in an instant. Conversations halted, and the cheers from just moments before turned into hushed murmurs. Those closest to the scene instinctively moved aside, creating a small clearing around the girl. A few people extended their hands, unsure of what to do in the confusion. Her father crouched beside her, trying to help her to her feet, but the little girl remained frozen. Her wide eyes darted around, searching for something familiar, something safe, amidst the towering figures that surrounded her. From the stage, Donald Trump had been addressing the crowd, his voice commanding attention as usual. But now, he paused. His gaze fixed on the commotion, and his expression changed. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking in what had happened. The silence that followed was almost as loud as the cheers had been just moments earlier. And then, he moved. What he did next wasn't what anyone expected. Without hesitation, Trump stepped away from the podium. He gestured briefly to his security team, who looked uncertain but quickly made way as he descended from the stage. The crowd's attention followed him like a wave, every head turning to watch as he made his way toward the little girl. The rally, with all its noise and excitement, seemed to shrink into the background as this singular moment unfolded. By the time he reached her, the girl was still sitting on the ground, clutching her father's arm as if it were the only solid thing in the world. Trump knelt down to her level, speaking softly, though his words were lost in the distance. What mattered wasn't what he said but how he said it. His demeanor, calm and steady, seemed to cut through the chaos, offering reassurance where moments before there had been fear. The girl looked up at him, her face still marked with uncertainty but now tinged with something else, curiosity, perhaps, or trust. Her father helped her to her feet, and Trump placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering a brief smile before turning to address the crowd once more. But let me ask you, if you were in that audience, how would you have reacted? Would you have been among those who reached out to help, or would you have stood frozen, unsure of what to do? These moments, so small in the grand scheme of things, often reveal more about us than we realize. The rally wasn't over, but this moment changed its tone completely. What had been an event about politics became something more personal, more human. And the crowd, though still processing what they had witnessed, responded with a mix of admiration and reflection. From the moment Donald Trump stepped off the stage, the atmosphere in the rally shifted entirely. The energy of thousands seemed to condense into a silent anticipation, all eyes fixed on the unexpected turn of events. His movements were purposeful, unhurried, yet entirely focused on the little girl still standing with her father. It was the kind of moment that didn't need words to hold everyone's attention. He motioned to his security team, who cleared a path through the dense crowd. People stepped back instinctively, some craning their necks to see better, others simply frozen in place, unsure of what they were witnessing. When Trump reached the girl, he didn't stand above her or address the audience. Instead, he lowered himself to her level, kneeling on the ground so their eyes met. He smiled, not the polished expression reserved for cameras, but something softer, more personal. Quietly, he asked if she was okay. The girl, still clutching her father's arm, looked at him wide-eyed, unsure how to respond. Her father leaned in, murmuring reassurances, and the girl nodded shyly. Then, in a move that caught everyone off guard, Trump extended his hand toward her. There was a brief hesitation before she placed her small hand in his. He stood up slowly, lifting her gently as if she weighed nothing, and held her securely while walking her back toward her parents. The father stepped forward, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief, as Trump placed the girl back into his arms. For a moment, no one said a word. The crowd, which had been silent, erupted into applause. But this wasn't the usual rally cheer. It was something more subdued, more heartfelt, a recognition of the humanity in what had just unfolded. The cameras captured the scene, but for those present, it was a moment they wouldn't forget, not because of who Trump was but because of what he chose to do. Now let me ask you, what would you have done in his place? Would you have paused a high-stakes event to focus on one small moment, or would you have carried on, trusting that someone else would handle it? These decisions may seem simple, but they often reveal more about a person than words ever could. As Trump returned to the stage, the tone of the rally felt different. He didn't make a grand statement about what had just happened, nor did he use the moment to pivot back into his speech. Instead, he simply resumed, as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. But for the audience, and perhaps even for the family involved, the impact of that brief gesture lingered. The moment Trump placed the little girl back in her father's arms, a wave of applause swept through the crowd. But this wasn't the typical rally cheer, full of chants and slogans. This felt different. It was softer, more genuine, like the collective exhale of thousands of people who had just witnessed something unexpectedly human. People in the audience turned to each other, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration. Some wiped away tears, moved by the simplicity of the gesture. Others held their children closer, perhaps reminded of the vulnerability of moments like these. Even those who had come to the rally with different expectations couldn't help but pause and reflect on what they had just seen. Trump, now back on the stage, took a moment before speaking. His usual commanding tone softened slightly as he addressed the crowd. "Sometimes," he began, "it's not about politics or speeches. It's about being there for each other when it matters most." His words were brief, but they carried a weight that resonated far beyond the rally. "No one," he continued, "is too important or too busy to lend a hand when someone needs it." The applause grew louder, but there was no fanfare in how he spoke, no attempt to turn the moment into something bigger than it needed to be. He simply acknowledged what had happened, emphasizing the importance of compassion and moving forward. It wasn't a grand speech, it was a reminder of something simple yet often forgotten. For the family at the center of it all, the moment seemed surreal. The little girl, now safely held by her father, clutched a small flag she had been given earlier, her wide eyes still watching Trump as he returned to his address. Her mother, standing close, gave a grateful nod toward the stage, a silent acknowledgement of the unexpected kindness they had just experienced. Now, think about this: how often do we overlook opportunities to step up in small but meaningful ways? Would you have taken the same path Trump did, or would you have let the moment pass, thinking it wasn't your responsibility? These questions lingered in the minds of many that day, and perhaps even in the days that followed. As the rally continued, the mood had shifted. The energy was still there, but it felt lighter, more connected. People stayed longer, talked more with those around them, and left the event not just with memories of a speech but with a story they couldn't wait to share. A story not about politics or power, but about humanity. Before we move on, let me ask, have you ever witnessed a moment like this, where a simple act of kindness changed everything? Share your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story resonated with you, take a moment to like and subscribe. It's through your support that we can continue to bring you stories that remind us of the power of small actions to leave a lasting impact. As the rally wound down, many in the crowd couldn't stop replaying what they had just seen. It wasn't the words from the podium that stuck with them, it was a moment of unexpected humility and care. A powerful figure stepping away from the spotlight, even if just for a minute, to show compassion in a way no one anticipated. For some, it was a reminder that true leadership isn't about towering above others, it's about knowing when to kneel down. The little girl, now cradled safely in her father's arms, clung to the small flag she'd been waving earlier. It was clear that, in her young mind, this rally was about more than just the loud cheers or the flashing lights. It had become a memory she wouldn't fully understand until much later, a moment that would remind her that even the most towering figures can be human. But what does this mean for the rest of us? How often do we step back from our own busy lives to notice those around us who might need a hand? Would we make the effort to pause and act, or would we assume someone else will take care of it? These aren't easy questions to answer, but they're worth considering. Donald Trump didn't have to leave that stage. The moment could have passed unnoticed by many, and the rally would have continued as planned. But he chose to act. That choice didn't just change the atmosphere of the event, it left an impression that would stay with everyone there. It's moments like these that remind us of the ripple effects a single decision can have, even in the most unexpected settings. Let's bring this back to you. Have you ever witnessed something that made you stop and rethink your own priorities? Maybe it was a simple act of kindness, or perhaps it was someone stepping in at just the right moment. Share your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear your stories. And if this story has resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. These moments of connection and reflection are what keep us grounded, and your support helps us share more stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and until next time, let's all remember the power of being present when it truly counts.